Ready. Hey, everybody. To the right of me, or maybe the left of you, I don't know, is our dear friend and Head Start lifer, Denise Rokicki or Rikitsugi, which is the preferred way to say it. And just as I'm calling you, I'm getting a phone call. But I'm going to let that go. I can't even find my phone. Look, I'm Holly Elisa Bruno. I'm with Denise, and we meet every week. Hi, guys. And Denise will say hi in about a minute, but we meet every week. Why? Because we are trauma survivors and because we are out as trauma survivors and because we have discovered that telling the truth about our experience is more helpful than pretending that we're just fine. Thank you very much. And we're finding more and more predictable, little, minuscule, big, medium-sized commonalities that we have. And those commonalities invite me as a survivor each time to say, do I want to just knuckle under this because it's so scary and so frightening? Or do I want to turn around and face it and say, hello, shame. I've known you my whole life. Shame on you. I heard all the time and I believed it. I believed I was the problem. And when I look at shame in a new way, I can say, look, you have controlled me much of my life. I'm 78 now. I'm not going to do that anymore. I would like for us to have a relationship that's more healthy. So thank you. Thank you for keeping me safe for many years because I was ashamed of myself. I wouldn't do things that I would otherwise have done that would have gotten me into severe difficulty. But I'm an adult now in many ways, and that's time to say goodbye to that. So, Denise, what would you like to say to welcome folk to this podcast?
Well, what I understand now after years of being engaged in healing, self-help, groups, therapeutic interventions, is that the best way to heal is to be heard. Now, you mentioned that to speak our truth, but also to be heard
Yes.
is so good, such a good part.
And how
And,
on earth do you do that, Denise? When I mean, it's one thing, it's a whole life process to be able to get in touch with my truth and then, secondly, be able to speak it. But how do we know that someone is listening to us?
I can just feel that connection, that they believe you.
Mm-hmm.
They're they're not trying to say, well, get over it. They're listening, and usually people that are good listeners also, will comment or give you feedback like you're brave, you're strong, you're resilient.
Thank you. I hear you. What I'm understanding also, because it's also true for me, is that when someone's really present for me, that's kind of a cliche, but when someone is really wanting to get who I am and really paying attention, not just to what I'm saying with my words, but with my face, with my voice, with my gestures, and and responding when it's appropriate to respond, responding in a way that I understand this person has heard me. And for years, I've written that what traumatized children need are three things. One is to be heard. The second is to be seen. And the third is to be believed. And as trauma survivors, I didn't have that. Wasn't seen, wasn't heard, and nobody believed me. And I was warned if I told anybody, what was going on, the abuse going on, that, I would be made to look stupid and foolish. And we've had people on this program who've talked about that, being shamed, their parents shaming them with their teachers and their mentors and all of that, so that speaking out would have made them look like liars. Yeah. So, what are those three? We need to be seen, we need to be heard, and we need to be believed. How does that feel to you as a trauma survivor, both as a child and as an adult?
Yeah, it's the truth. And I think we also need to develop long-term friendships of
Yes.
people who know who I am. For example, I have a online friendship with a woman that we started the group long ago. And, we used to meet for an hour, like 3 times a week with groups. But now we then we met for an hour for years every Monday. And now we meet for a half hour because we don't, our issues are not pending. We just check in with each other. But when we started, our issues were pending. We were disassociating. We were, in crisis. We were in fear.
Yeah. And it's such a great feeling to know that that isn't what you just described, isn't our present reality every day.
Right. Because we
And
put
yeah,
effort to healing.
it's putting effort to healing. And one of the specifics for me as a trauma survivor is to prevent crisis from coming up. And that usually, to me, Denise, means internal crisis. I can tell now, it's like back in the day, they used to have this thing called a DEW system, a distant early warning system. If there was going to be a missile coming in, like incoming from Russia or whatever the scary place was at the time. And for me, I now both cognitively and intuitively know if danger is coming. I can feel danger much better than before. So simple things like years ago, I went through, and you did this in a different way, but we both did it. We needed to find out what our feelings were and to
Right.
befriend our feelings. I mean, here we are with this hero, Fred Rogers, who would say, "What do I do with the mad that I have?" And I would say, "Well, that's not for me because I'm not mad. I'm not angry. Women don't get angry." Well, crockabola.
Right.
I
Yeah,
kept so much rage down.
right. We push it down.
Right. And so that getting in touch with feelings meant I needed to accept that I had anger and I needed to accept that I had rage. And acceptance also meant we could do a whole program on this. Acceptance also meant beginning to let myself feel my rage, feel it. First, I was I was learning to feel anger, and I learned that I would get this flame like feeling. It was like a torch was lit inside of me, and I needed to speak out and tell someone to back off. I had a strong feeling inside of myself of someone violating me. And of course, there were all kinds of ways that I was violated as a child. Another thing was my heart was beating. My heart would beat. I would be short of breath. And here's what's interesting. I had a trauma counselor say to me when I was in recovery, inpatient recovery, at a place called the Meadows, which was for all kinds of addictions. And my addiction was codependency because I was a people pleaser as a result of being a trauma survivor. This woman, Pia Melody, has written a lot of books, said to us, she said, look, fear and anger are flatlined. They're on the same continuum. Whether I respond with fear or I respond with anger depends on how powerful I feel. That made real sense to me
Yeah.
because when I don't feel powerful, a force coming at me to violate me in one way or another, I feel fear like, oh my God, I'm going to get hurt again. I can't stand this. Let me run for the hills, the 5 F's. I'll get out of here with fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or float. But when I see something coming my way and it's not appropriate and I'm able to be angry, man, I can do boundaries. And since we're talking about boundaries, I want to ask you about that. When you hear about that continuum, that our emotions, we could either feel fear or if we feel confident, powerful, we can have anger. Does that work for you too?
Um, I still have a very distant relationship with anger.
That's okay.
Um, I I have a really hard time trying to conjure up what that feels like, or even, that I have experienced it.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Which
that would,
I know
mhm.
that there's, all different levels of that's what I learned in one of my therapies, that anger could be so very slight. It doesn't have to be fierce, right? Or it could be fierce but not explosive, or yeah, I still don't really know anger that well.
Is that something that you want to work on?
Maybe you know, when I think about big sensations, it would
Hmm.
be trigger, when I get triggered. And that may be that I'm triggered into anger, but then I immediately breathe. And interesting for me, I was away from my family for 35 years, and then I came back in a much different state of being, more healed. And
Hmm.
when I first came back, I would get triggered by my mom all the time. And I guess that was mad. I didn't want to say I was mad, but I think that is what I'm looking for in anger. I think
I
that's
hear
really
you.
it. Yeah, I
I
think I
think
just discovered that. I would get triggered, and that I called it triggered as opposed to angry. And
and so
but I've been
sometimes,
back,
yeah, you might have been triggered and been sad by something that your family did too. That's a different trigger, triggered into
right.
sadness. But you were triggered in a way that you felt like what? What did you know what you felt like inside your body?
Like yeah, it was uptight, like, ugh,
Hmm.
like that.
Put up your dukes.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
the
I
re-
didn't want to swing, though. I never felt like
Mhm.
swinging back or even verbalizing that, that sucks what you just said. Or, for example, it used to trigger me when I would visit my mom and we watched Jeopardy, and she would tell me how good George is at the game, and how my brother, she's a, she only, she's always trying to make the world right for men. She
Mhm.
only loves men. Men are superior to her. And I would sit there and answer questions, and she would never
Couldn't
acknowledge.
hear.
She didn't even hear it, probably. I don't know. She acts like she doesn't hear it. And so a few times ago, she said it, and I said, "Well, I'm smart too."
Good for you.
And she couldn't even respond,
Yep.
she just let it go. And then the last time we were there, I was there this week with them at the cottage. And really, basically, what I do when I'm with my mom now is watch her TV shows that
Mm-hmm.
she watches. I sit with her and watch. She's 88, she's not fully frail, but she's frail. And so I sit and watch TV, which I'm not a big TV person,
Mm-hmm.
but Jeopardy is one of them, and Wheel of Fortune. We sat there, and George was in with us watching this time. Normally he's upstairs, but at the cottage it's one room, so he's with us. And I answered one, nothing. George answered one. She said, "Good job." Yeah, good job. George answered another one. Good job. I answered another one. Nothing. But it did not trigger me. I was just, that's who she is. That's where she can't. She is incapable. I think
You know,
we talked about that in messaging.
yes.
She
I'm
just
so Yeah, go ahead, sweetie.
not pissing me off anymore. It's not triggering me. It's just the way it is. And it doesn't diminish me. I am still smart, even though she won't, let that be, or
You know,
won't
I
acknowledge.
want to I want to first say I'm sorry that you didn't get that reinforcement because every trauma survivor I know needs to hear, wow, good job.
You
You
did
did
it.
that really well. My God, that was, yeah, I just learned from you. I have an open heart when it comes to that. When I see anything that is remarkable to me, like even if it's a child doing something that most children do, but one child is taking a long time, man, it is remarkable to me. And we have this professional organization, NAEYC, the National Association for the Education of Young Children. And for years, they have said, now don't just say good job to a child. That's not enough. Engage with the child. And I've
Right,
been angry about that. Angry. And I feel my ire coming up. And why is that? It's because of two things. One, I agree with them, engaging with the child and wanting to understand the child's process. That's a wonderful thing to do to help the child see, well, yeah, that color orange goes really well with that color black. Can you say why you picked it? Well, maybe a child doesn't know why she picked it. It just felt right.
right,
But still giving the child a chance to explore that I love. But the thing that I'm really angry about, and I speak out about it, is wait a minute. You're talking about non-traumatized children.
right.
Traumatized children need to hear from somebody on earth. So glad you're here. Wow, you did that beautifully. Good job.
Right. Even good job is something, and we need it.
Do you see that as an early childhood professional, Denise, for decades? Do you see that as harmful to a child if we say good job to a child?
I don't. I don't see how that's harmful. I do see the benefit of recommending people get eye level and talk about it. I do.
Yes.
I want people to do that. I don't want to just hear good job, good job, good job, good job. It has to be a genuine good job. And, if you can continue that conversation, bam, do it. Also saying exactly, good job. You stepped up here and turned facing forward and looked at your teacher to look for the next rules or the next directions. That helps other kids hear it. Those
Yes.
audio learning kids get it too. The visual kids see the kid.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
it does teach, it's a good group management technique as well.
Right. Because all the children are learning. I think I might have to write a paper or something on this because I'm concerned that for all the traumatized children and also the traumatized adults who work in early childhood, which is a minimum of 58% of us, we need to hear good job.
Right,
And I think it's great if we can have substantive times. You just great gave a true example of what if a child looks at the teacher in the eye and faces the teacher, and that's hard for the child, maybe culturally hard, or maybe interpersonally hard, or neurochemically hard. But what
right,
you just said was, look, good job. Here's what you just did. One, two, three. And here's how it's helping other people. Three, four, five. And I'm
right,
really proud of you because I know that that's been hard for you. And I want to say, can I give you a hug? I'm really happy that you were able to do that. That's very important. All of that is great if I have time to say that, and the child will
right.
take the child might be able to take that in. But here's the other challenge: trauma surviving children and adults have a hard time taking in positive
Believing it.
feedback. You
Right,
can't believe it. It's like a deflective system. You tell me something awful about myself, and I say, well, that's true. I got to do
right,
something about that. And you tell me something good. Like every time someone would tell me I was attractive, I would go, oh, that's what he wants something out of me.
right.
It was
And what
manipulative.
good does that do me? That's what I would always think. Being attractive does nothing good for me.
I hear you. And that's because of the sexual abuse that we both paid. I mean, somebody either found us attractive or they found
Right,
us
and took
needed
us.
and took over our vulnerability and our boundaries without asking.
Innocence,
Innocence.
innocence. That's what
Innocence
gets
is
robbed.
huge. Innocence is huge. That's another topic, Denise.
Yeah. We
It's
have too
another
many
topic.
topics.
We got to, well, let's write them down because we'll bring them up. But let's go back to this thing about we've been talking about boundaries And we've discovered that most of us, this is one thing I've discovered, and if there's something you recall that you discovered, please say, but most of us who are traumatized as children are from no boundaries households. No boundaries household means in my family, I literally could not shut the door to my bedroom. Anyone, the predator in my family, could just walk in. He could just walk in. People would talk with me about things as if I were an adult. They shared things that a child never should have heard. My mother would use me as her emissary. She would say, your father is liking this other woman. That's wrong. You know that's wrong. You go tell him that he can't take her to this hockey game at Cornell. Was my mother telling me this? I was a good kid with her because she was mentally disturbed. So I went to my father and I said, you know, mother would like it if you didn't take Mrs. So and so to the hockey game. Now, I don't know if my father, who was a narcissist, just needed another. I don't know what his reason for taking this woman was, but my mother didn't like hockey. She didn't ever go to school. And so going back to Cornell University to see a hockey game was not my mother's thing. Maybe it was this other person's thing. Maybe it was innocent. I don't know. But here's what I remember. Not only was my boundary being violated because it was my mother's issue with my father and she was projecting it into me. And guess what happened? I remember feeling high. I felt high on adrenaline because my mother's sexual energy was like she's transmitting that to me. Well, he owes me, and don't you just go tell him what a 5, 6 year old kid going in between. That was another violation of boundaries, and a third violation of boundaries was when nobody either saw me, they didn't see that I was there, so they just walk right over me, or they saw me and had no respect for my identity. Is seeing me like, okay, don't talk, keep your mouth shut. Nobody wants to hear from you. Or they would say to me, nobody wants to see a little girl with a frown on her face. You put that smile on your face. Those were boundary invasions too. The worst of all were the demeaning and the annihilation, where when horrid things were done to me, either by my mother or my father, I didn't exist for them. That was the worst boundary violation. I didn't exist. And not being seen makes it hard to know I have an identity. So when you describe, because you nodded when we talked about boundary-less childhoods, can you talk about that so that if someone's just joining us, either after this program or during the program, what would you say? How would you explain that your childhood was without boundaries as well?
Well, I wasn't seen, heard, or believed.
Hmm.
For example, the
Yep.
first time I was sexually molested that I remember of, I was 7 or 8. I was
Hmm.
outside unsupervised, running around the neighborhood, and some big boy, I don't know who he was. I never did get an identity on him. Sometimes I think it might have been a certain individual, but I'm not sure. There were times in my life that I thought I made this up, that
Yes.
it was a fantasy. But what happened was he took me into a garage in the alley, abandoned garage or their garage, or I don't know. There were a lot of garages in our alleys,
Yep.
and did strange things to me, and masturbated, and it got pee or sperm or whatever in my pants. And so I went home and told my mom, this boy peed in my pants. And she said, you're lying. Go upstairs and change your clothes and get cleaned up.
Ah,
And never talked about it again.
what a dismissal.
Yeah, so that's the kind of boundaryless that's the way I experienced. You don't get boundaries.
Right. And when you tell that, when a child who's been traumatized tells the truth, get away. I don't want to hear from you. I don't even, you
Right.
don't, I don't believe you. You're
One of my
making
mom's
up.
famous sayings, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No,
I'm practicing on that.
it's
Was
okay.
my mom's favorite thing to say is, "Don't tell me until you're married. Don't tell me till after you're married." She would say that a lot when we were starting to have questions about boyfriends and whatnot, things like that. She'd say, "Don't talk about it until you're after you're married."
So you were supposed to figure it all out yourself.
Right.
Yeah. My parents had this horrible book, which I read called The Facts of Life and Love for Teenagers. This was in the 1950s. And my mother never talked about, she just, it's too shaming for her to talk about sexuality. But somehow they let us know, they made the book visible. I pulled it off the shelf and I read that thing. It was the worst. It was like a guide to how to be a good housewife, how to make the man happy. And it said things like, if you get your period, now they explain what a period was and how you shouldn't get near any boy when you had your period because boys didn't like it, and never go swimming. You couldn't go swimming. I said, wait, what? There was a group of kids I knew that was going to go with a supervisor to learn water skiing. And I got my period. And I said, damn, I want to learn how to water ski. So on my own, because this book said, don't you talk about it. Don't you dare do anything about it. And be very discreet. Have your mother buy well, not even tampons, those Kotex pads for you. Oh my God. But I knew that there had to be something. So I'm walking around the Rexall drugstore and I read that I saw these things next to the Kotex pads and it said tampons. And I looked at that and with my heart pounding, I read the instructions and I thought, this might do it. I'm going to do this. And I read them again. I read them again. I walked around the store. I bought something else. I came back with my babysitting money. I bought that. And I remember just now, I can recall the whole thing being in that bathroom. There was the women's bathroom. My father had his own bathroom. The second floor bathroom was women's. I shut the door, couldn't lock it, but I shut the door and I read each word, each sentence, followed the instructions, didn't feel comfortable, but I did it. And then that afternoon, I went and learned water skiing.
But
Went, yeah, honey. But
it weird that we had to learn for ourselves. We had to figure things out for ourselves. We didn't have guidance.
we didn't have guidance. And here's what I felt. And this is, I think, the basic heart cry of any trauma survivor. Nobody cares about me. Nobody loves me. Therefore, I'm not worth being loved. I'm worthless. I'm like, throw me away because that's what they do. You use Holly Elise, she'll mow the lawn. She'll mow the whole lawn to try to take care of us. She'll sit with a mother who's going psychotic and sing to the mother. She'll do that. She'll do anything. I felt like I was the nuclear waste dump for my family. They could dump anything on me. My father would tell me these horrible things about dreams that he had. And I'd say, I was a good listener. I'd say, well, do you want to, I don't know how I said it as a kid, but I would just listen. He'd say, yeah, I dreamed that I was buried alive. And, that's a scary thing to say to a child. But I would
Right.
have to sit there and just listen to him because he was the adult. And I couldn't allow myself to show fear. Or maybe he liked it if I showed fear and tried to keep it down because he was sadistic. But
Right.
this whole so what we concluded on prior programs, and you guys, if you want to, you can just tune into any of those prior programs. We've posted now. We're getting better at posting the link. And we will post also, if it's not in that announcement, maybe it is, how to go back and see prior programs, and they're all labeled. So you can go back and see, for example, the other ones on having boundaries and not having boundaries. But Denise and I just talked about it, and we decided today we talk about, and we got 20 minutes to 25 minutes to do this in, and we'll do what we can. It's the relationship between me as a trauma survivor, you as a trauma survivor, and narcissists. And let's just define narcissism from the get-go here. Because I think most of us, if not all of us, have narcissists in our families. According to the research I've read, the United States has only 200,000 narcissists, and the majority of them are men. But I challenge that, and I've talked with professionals about that, and they challenge it too. They say, well, possibly that research is only based in who is reporting, self-reporting as a narcissist. Now, how many narcissists are going to see themselves as narcissists?
Right, none.
None. I mean, they see themselves as the center of the universe. And if you go online and check out, thank God it's now in the DMR, what's it called? The listing of mental
Mental
neurodiverse.
illness.
Yeah, the DM something. That's one of those things I block. I cannot, but I will be able to come up with it. It's the directory of
Mental illness, DMI.
DMI. Okay, the DMI. Okay, so now, I mean, for years homosexuality was in. That's
Right.
how this understanding has evolved. But it was only like a few decades ago, the 1980s or something, that being homosexual was seen as, wait a minute, this is okay.
Okay.
And they had to argue their tails off. I mean, argue, work it. And so just of late, I think within the last 20 years, in the DMI is narcissistic personality disorder. And if you go there, actually, I'm just going to ask Denise, can you talk about what you know are some of the traits of narcissists? And then I'll build on that, because that's basically, we know it. If we are trauma survivors, we know narcissistic behavior. It's just that as children, I had no idea that's what that was called. I didn't know it was a
Right.
disorder. I thought it was just, that's the way fathers are. That's the way my father is. He's the
That's
God.
the way that's
He's
the
the
way
God.
people are.
That's
Uh
right.
and that they are the worthy and we are the unworthy,
Correct.
basically. Yeah, I listened to the first video
Oh,
that you sent me, podcast about narcissism. Yeah, self-centered. Um, they control the environment as much as possible.
so center
Yeah,
of the universe, control, deep need for control. Also in totally the powerful one. Nobody else has the kind of power. The
right.
world is all a supply to the narcissist. And that's what that means to me is the world exists. Every one of us exists to give the narcissist what he needs.
To
I don't have it
complement
like
them.
to
Right.
compliment them and to, in the case of being a sexual abuse survivor, when my father demanded what he demanded, even when I was a small child, I didn't have a choice.
Right.
I, I couldn't say no. I couldn't, he would hit me if I cried. And you know what? I just want to say we might be talking about something here that's difficult for listeners to hear. And Denise and I are committed to having boundaries on this program. So one of the things we
And
recommend
safety.
is safety and take self-care. So we recommend taking care of yourself. I just mentioned that my father hit me when he was abusing me sexually and told me I could not cry. I couldn't cry. So here's a glass of water. Why? Because our throats get dry. My throat gets dry as a trauma survivor when I get scared. And just taking that moment out away from what I was thinking about gives me a moment to say, it would be good to breathe right now. And Janice, can you talk with people, please, about how they can find the trauma warm line so that if they need to call and talk with somebody who's a peer counselor, what did they Google? Because anytime we're talking about something, if you feel uncomfortable, respect your boundary. We respect it. Do whatever you need to take care of yourself. Go drink a glass of water, leave the program for a while, come back. write us on the chat and say, wait, gotta stop it right here. And Denise, at any time, who can people call? What's this warm line about? It's not a
You can just
hotline.
go
It's warm.
on your Google here. Whoops. Just go Google warm line, trauma warm line, and it will show you state by state. You can call any state. Some states are 24 hours, 7 days, or you can go to your state and maybe get a local person. If you can't, you can go to someone from another state. But you just call the number. The numbers are right there.
And they will listen to you. They will not judge you. They are also trauma survivors and trained about how to help trauma
Informed,
survivors.
right?
They're trauma informed and they know how to help work us through panic attacks, help us face when we're scared to death. And in some states, I think Massachusetts may have a place where you can text. So if you're in the middle of something and you can't call, you can text. It's like that. What is that symbol that kids can do and adults can do?
Help
If
me.
you're in danger, help me. Yeah, that's,
I
you
don't know
should,
what it is, but if anybody does any hand signal at me,
I'm saying, wait.
right, I'm calling 911.
I've seen ads for it and a child does
But
something
it's
like,
something like, I know the sign language, this is help, but
okay, but this
I
is
don't know.
one-handed, it's a one-handed thing.
It's one hand, you can do it behind you, and it's something like help me. It might be M, help me,
Okay.
might be help me. But I mean, if anybody's doing some kind of sign, I'm gonna follow
It's
them and
enough.
dial 911.
Yes. I was so relieved to hear that because as a child, if I could have just had a sign like that, would have made a huge difference. Of course, I still would have been scared because who would I have taken to the police and who did my parents know and who thought my parents were the perfect parents? Child's making it up. But still today, there are services that can help.
Right.
So, okay, so we're talking about boundaries and we're talking about narcissists, and here's the truth. Narcissists, the truth from my experience, strength, and hope in life, narcissists are very attracted to trauma survivors. It's as if we have the big TS written right here. And that doesn't mean tough shit. That means trauma survivor, trauma survivor. It's like that woman in the 19th century novel. What was it? The Scarlet Letter, who was,
Right.
God forbid, had a child without being married, and father the child was the preacher man. He punished himself by wearing a hair shirt that made his skin torn up and itchy and horrible. And nobody saw that. But she, because she was the female, had to wear a scarlet letter A on her chest because that informed everybody she was the adulterer. And no one would marry her, and her child was shunned. Her child, whose name was something like Grace or something like that, was shunned. It was the person who was the recipient of the sexual act that was blamed. It's just like
Right.
the raped person gets blamed.
Right.
But I feel like, Denise, I have had, well, I think it's both ways. I think narcissists have a sense of who can be vulnerable to them and who they can quickly win over.
Right.
And I think I, as a survivor, was raised to look for people that were hurting and help them feel better about themselves. In fact, I don't think that. I know that to my core. So let's talk about why we as trauma survivors almost inevitably have at some point in our lives, or many points, relationships with narcissists. Given everything you said about narcissists being all about themselves, they use people, they can't see other people, they manipulate people. And once they've won us over with something called love bombing, And you can talk about that in a minute. But once they've won us over, what do? Then they start demeaning us.
Right.
They
And
start putting,
isolate and
yes, isolate,
control.
control and isolate, like one of the things a trauma, I've seen this over and over again, very personally, as the trauma survivor will say to the narcissist will say to the trauma survivor, why do you need to call your mother so much? Why don't you come to me with your problems? I thought I was your husband. Why are you calling your friend all the time? Why aren't you talking with me? You know, I can help you solve your problems. Why do you have to go out with your girlfriends? I think that Suzanne is boring, and that Yvette, oh my God, she's ugly. Why do you want to be with somebody that's ugly? Um, he will demean everybody, and then continuously shame the person. What you calling your mother again? And he'll stalk around the background while you're talking on the phone.
Right.
And that your mother might be saying, well, so what's something's going on? Something's bothering you. I can feel something's going on. Do you want to talk about it? Oh, no, I'm fine. Everything's good. Oh, my husband, he's doing great. He's just the best. And then the lies begin. And as the lies begin, the separation from the true self grows stronger and stronger. And I replace my true self with my false self. And then I'm not living anymore. I'm not living. I'm just faking it. So, Denise, why would we be so attracted to someone who's so self centered?
Well, because their confidence is appealing.
Mm-hmm.
To see someone with that type of confidence is, wow, look at that. Um, Interestingly, I also felt like I was marked,
Yes.
abused me, molest me, something like that,
Ah,
like you mentioned. I had
mhm.
that same exact vision uh, of myself. And I think we just send out the vibes of, worthlessness, or that we don't even know we don't love ourselves, but other people can see it. Maybe
I
I
think you're
think
right.
a vibe.
I think I've had two superb trauma therapists, and one of them used to use the word needy. I feel like as a trauma survivor, I really was needy. The minute I thought I could be intimate with someone, because trauma survivors are, excuse me, narcissists are so good at being persuasive. Oh my God, you're just the most beautiful person in my life. They do what's called love bombing. Have you had love bombing done to you?
Um, Maybe a long, long time ago. I think, once I got boundaries, they were so strong that I have not really had to deal with that much
Mm.
along the
Well,
way. But before I was done any healing,
yeah.
yes, I felt unworthy, that, I had to please the person,
Hmm.
and their self-confidence and self-centeredness was like a good example for, like, I I wanted to learn that, or I don't know why I was appealing, or it's because it was, wow, you could be that self-confident. Wow.
So you're making really helpful points about why we are attracted to somebody who has something that we don't have.
Right.
They appear to have it together. They appear to be um, aware of themselves. And that's something that I've always been attracted to because it's what I needed for myself. I wanted to be, who was I? I was my parents would tell me who I was. You're going to be a this or that. You're going to be a housewife. That's what you're going to be. And you're going to have children. And that's your sense of worth. And I wanted to be like an explorer or a little kid. I wanted to be a horseback rider. I wanted to do and be all these things that were not at all acceptable. So I think what you're saying is, at least I get it, that the trauma survivor is attracted to someone that looks really Like you've got some stuff I could learn from and that I could value and that I could honor. Love bombing, just in case I haven't been clear, is packaging up these missiles of manipulative, condescending compliments, totally designed to get the narcissist in, pull them in by saying
Right.
things that the needy narcissist has never heard. Wow. What you said there was just really smart. Man, I've never thought about that. Wow. You probably did really well in school. Oh, you didn't? Well, there was something wrong with the teachers, not you.
Right.
My
Don't
God,
worry, your pretty little head was one that I got. Don't worry, your pretty little head. Like, I'm not smart enough anyway,
but you're pretty.
but I'm pretty.
And you're attractive, and that's what the narcissist needs. And guess what? You have to maintain the attractiveness for the narcissist to look good. I know this was a lesbian couple where the one woman kept dyeing her hair, and I'd say to her, girl, it's not like you to dye your hair. What you doing? She said, oh well, so and so doesn't like me to have white hair, and so I'm dyeing it. There it is. There it
Yeah.
is. You got to please the other person. But the scary thing about one of the scary things about narcissism and love bombing is that the love bombing persists until the needy, homeless, helpless, heartbroken trauma survivor says, oh my God, someone finally sees me. Somebody finally loves me. Somebody wants me for me. And as soon as they have won us over, then what happens to all those compliments? Then what happens to all of that positivity? It starts disappearing. And another, because that was controlling. And then another type of control comes up. How would you describe the control that a narcissist uses once he has or she has entrapped, once they've caught the needy trauma survivor? What kind of abusive behavior then begins and continues?
Yeah. Mostly in my experience is the control. They want to be with you all the time. They want to control where you go, who you see, who you talk to. They isolate you.
Right. And there's the control in that way, and there's a other side of control, which is to demean you.
Which I didn't get too much of that. I mean, I think it was sideways. Don't worry your
Sideways,
pretty
like
little head.
that was demeaning. You're right.
Right. Sideways demeaning. Nothing directly, you're dumb, you're crazy, nothing like that, which I have heard other people experience.
Mm.
So I never really had that, luckily.
I got things like, that's probably going to sound familiar to people listening. I got things like, wow, you put on some weight. And there are some of us this is a quote, there's some of us who remember what it was like when you didn't have that extra weight on your hips. Maybe you could do something about that. Um, or oh my God, you sure you want to wear that outfit? That's a little bit too revealing. Mm-hmm. And then all of these demeaning in one way or another. And with my father, he was more overt than covert. There's a lot of covert under the surface narcissists, like to say to you, don't worry your pretty little head, you're not smart. And I'm smarter than you, but you're attractive. You're eye candy for me.
Right.
And I have this great wife back at home, and she cooks for me, and she just cleans for me, and she does all of this. And of course, that's what I deserve because I'm number one. But my father was more of a sadistic narcissist, and I've come to see by continuously studying narcissism, there's something called an altruistic narcissist. This is my husband. He appeared not just in love bombing, but he appeared to be this friendly man who was all about caring for other people. all about caring for other people. That's the way he presented himself to the world. However, once at home with the closed doors, he was all about himself, all about himself. I remember that when we were about to adopt our first child, and we had, this is back in the day, and remember shag rugs? There were shag rugs on the floor, and I knew I didn't want a toddler putting stuff in his mouth or like picking up, or, I didn't want that to be his dining room table, which it would be. So I said, hey, we need to get all of the rugs. We need to get the floors cleaned by a professional, and we need to get those rugs cleaned. Oh, no. I said, it has to be done for the safety and health of children here. Oh, no, that's too much money. And so I finally said, look, I will pay for it. I'm going to do it myself because it is essential. No, I don't want you to do that. No, you don't do that. Controlling even something that I knew was a necessity. And this was before I was in early childhood. I just knew that children put everything in their mouths and that they live close to the floor. And
Right.
so I hired on my own, I hired a person to come and scrub those floors, the wooden floors, and clean that carpet. And I decided I'm just not going to tell him because it's not worth the argument with him. However, the person that did this left a little tinfoil like barrier beneath any piece of furniture. And it couldn't be removed for 24 hours. So, of course, he spotted that and said, what's going on here? And there it was, the whole narcissistic thing. You said this before, it was really powerful. You said, when we're abused, we sometimes can't believe it happened. And so here I am defending myself for having done the right thing. And here I am accusing myself of, girl, did I spend too much money? But you know what? Inside myself, I knew I did the right thing. But the narcissist is exquisite at making us question ourselves. That's something you experience too?
And get guilt too. Uh, you should feel bad, shame and guilt about betraying their wishes or not doing what they expect you to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's it. They're in total control and they need to have total thought control,
Right.
total thought control. And so, look, how are trauma survivors set up to be the perfect prey for narcissists? Well, my father, as sexual abuser, had total control over me. I did not have a choice of when he did what he wanted to do for him. It didn't feel good. I hated the feeling. And it was frightening. It was the big man doing these things to a little girl. It was scary, scary. And he had such total control and so much of a right. He was his right to do that.
Right.
And a narcissist feels he has the right to be the God, to be the all-knowing, to be the person that sets the rules, to be the person that can break the rules for himself. But if we break his rules, no. And I'm saying him, but we know it's both women and men, but the majority in the United States and probably elsewhere of narcissists are males. So, Denise, when we think about narcissists and why, well, let me ask you this. How did you ever outgrow your narcissist? Because there's a fit there.
I I don't know. I think I overdid my boundaries really because I've also been single for a very long time. So I just I don't enter that I'm not available
Mm-hmm.
in the same way that I was.
But, and I hear you and I respect what you're saying. But what I'm wondering too, though, is you left a relationship. Did you,
I was
did,
asked to leave really.
Okay. All right. So there you go. Now that's powerful. Thank you for saying
Right,
that.
right.
Because a number of times, like I have stayed, and anybody listening, trauma survivor, how long have we overstayed? Overstayed in relationship when we knew it was bad. We knew it was bad for us. We knew we were dying. I was writing poetry at 3 in the morning when my babies would wake up and I need to comfort them. Of course, I was the one that was expected to go comfort the children. And so once I'd get them comforted, then I'd be wide awake and I'd be going to work in the morning. But I would sit in the bathroom where I could turn on the light and not disturb anybody and write poetry. And as I wrote the poetry, that came from my soul. And that's when I realized, oh my God, I'm dying. My soul is dying. I don't exist in this relationship. And that was before I'd even had the understanding to see that, to accept, back to what you said, Denise, people that are sexually abused, we often don't believe ourselves. And as I wrote in my book, I wrote, I went to my first incest survivors group when I was in inpatient treatment for codependency. And the thing that I noticed everybody said was, but that could, they described things that happened. But then they said, but that couldn't have happened to me because that was my grandfather and he loved me. He would never do that. One after another, people closed up themselves and the meeting by saying, that couldn't have happened to me. And for years, I had the shame and the guilt thinking, well, I'm really the sick one here because I'm imagining that my father did these things to me. I'm imagining that. And as long as I could blame myself, I could still have a relationship with them. But once I started coming out of that denial, that's when the dots started to connect. When I realized I'm an incest survivor, that's when I realized no wonder I married a narcissist. No wonder I worked in organizations where I became quickly the second in line, and my job was to do the work of my job and his job and make him
Right.
look good. And beneath the surface, he was being friendly, like making me really look good at first. But then as he'd start demeaning me, start picking holes, I'd prepare this whole big report that he would put his name on. Well, this isn't good enough. Send it back, calls me to question myself. So we only have about, I think we got about 4 minutes left because, but um, let's just reflect as we look at who we are as trauma survivors and how narcissists see our vulnerability and take advantage of that. What can we do? I mean, you've done many things, I've done many things. You've talked about having really strong boundaries. Are there other things you can do inside to take care of yourself, Janice, that makes you less vulnerable to a narcissist wooing of you?
Um, I, hmm, I just haven't had anybody wooing me, so it's hard to uh
Except
imagine.
talked lately about a person that was you had the
I had a
feeling for
crush, yeah.
crush,
I did
and
have a
she
recent,
was reciprocating.
yes.
And so that felt good for a while,
Yeah, it
but in
does feel good. But
yeah,
then
but
I realized it's not, it's not responsive to my needs. So I knew right away that that's not, I'm not going to further explore this.
and so did you have one experience or did you have a bunch of experiences that added up, or how did that work?
Just one. Once I knew
Mhm,
that that person's not available for the type of intimacy that I'm looking for.
mhm. And what's
And
great
I
is, yeah.
hopefully I can spot a narcissist, that I'm not,
Mhm,
I think I can, because I don't feel not worthy anymore. I feel worthy and I know I'm worthy and I know that there's no guilt or shame to associate with my what brought me here to who I am now. I have nothing to be guilty of. I have nothing to be shamed. So
So
they
that's a
can't
beautiful,
win. They
beautiful
can't
way.
win.
Hmm. Because you're not a victim.
Right. I went from a survivor to a thriver.
Hmm. I love that. And I am openly still in process. I love it when I have the maturity you were talking about before about being a grown up. I love it when I have the maturity and the wherewithal, and I have more and more of it to know more immediately. Well, it's happening to know, okay, no, I'm not going there. And to be able to say, no, no, that's doesn't work for me. I do that a lot now. And I'm also, here's a second part of that, Denise. I am also much better at not self, what's the word? Well, immolating, but not beating myself up afterwards. Did I do it right? Did I mess up? I'm much better at that. If I put up a boundary and I don't feel any support because it's a narcissist not going to support a boundary, I no longer say, well, geez, maybe I gave that person too hard a time, or maybe I shouldn't have been. But you know what? No, I'm getting better at that.
I
The
took care
truth.
of it.
Yes, I'm taking care of me. The thing, and I'll end with this, is that I want to say this is a great topic because I don't see many people writing about it. What I see people talking about is the relationship between narcissists and empaths.
Right.
Do you know many trauma survivors that aren't empathic?
No, I mean, we turn on certain things in our psyche to be safe.
Yep.
And those things are sensitive to the emotions, the spiritual inklings of
Mhm.
others around us. So no, we turn that on to be safe when we're little. And you have to learn how to keep yourself safe with that knowledge.
So the word hypervigilance, which you and I both have used before, does that
Right.
describe in part what you're talking about?
That's it. Yeah, our hypervigilance, we know who's doing what where.
Mm-hmm.
We know who's mad.
Mm-hmm.
We know who's unsettled, spiritually unsettled. We just know
You
because we
know.
attend.
And how did we learn that? In my case, I taught myself.
Right. We learned ourselves or we're talented with it. I mean, some people are born with that intuitive thing. I think I've developed it.
It's hard for me to say which it was. I think it was both because the abuse started at birth with my father yelling, get her out of my sight because I wasn't his son. And I've always been trying inside myself to make sense of things. So the two of us are now trying and inviting you, because we're going to close the program very soon. We're inviting you. Um, what do you feel is the relationship and the attraction between from a narcissist to be attracted to a trauma survivor? And what is it in the narcissist, in addition to what we've already said, that make us feel like, oh, this is a person I can be with? Denise talked about the person appears to be really confident, but in my case, it was the opposite, Denise. I knew deep inside this person was really hurting. And I knew I could help that person feel better about himself. And I devoted myself to his feeling good about himself.
Right.
What a sad thing. I didn't think I had any right because I'd raised my mother and praised my father. That's what I
We were
thought.
socialized as women to
Mhm.
also to build up our partner, to build up the man in
In the relationship.
heteronormative
Mm-hmm.
culture, but in lesbians as well
Mm-hmm.
to serve your partner and to sublimate your own needs and desires. Really, And that was not because of how narcissistic or see, like my partner was a Leo. That's how I always would describe it. Leos are self-centered, they're very self-centered. And so, uh, yeah, we learned to pay attention to that, and we were culturally groomed to support that.
I love what you just said, and that's a great place to close up because we find ways of enabling narcissists in whatever way works for us. You can use the signs and say, well, this explains it. I've had people say, well, he was the oldest in his family. What do you expect? He had to take charge. But if a woman was the oldest in the family, as you were, that didn't allow you to be a narcissist. That
No,
meant you had to be the caregiver. So it was gender based. And I think when we're talking about heteronormative stuff, here's what I feel like beneath the surface with any kind of relationship, any gender fluid relationship, is power. And if one person got more power than the other, that person can control the other person or can practice ways of sharing more and more power. And I think
right,
for me, in any developing relationship, there are times when I'm going to have more power. There are times when the other person is going to have more power. And the question becomes, how do I use the power that I have to be part of a relationship, not to try to have control over?
to enhance as opposed to attract.
And working with children, I hear and I can't stand it because it's too close to home that some people go into early childhood because the children just love them and that supports their ego. The children are just so loving. But that's feels to me something very wrong there because it's the opposite of what I feel working with children is about. It's helping them
Right,
discover their own identity, their own power, and their own boundaries. So
right.
perhaps that's a place where we need to end Denise for this week. And do you want to just invite people for the future and let them know how they can find out about the program? And maybe next week we'll have other people with us, which
Visitors,
was
yes.
fun.
I posted on my page the link to the group. Holly Lisa posted on her page. We're here every Monday that we can be. Occasionally we miss. I think we've only missed one that I know of.
Right, because I was speaking in at a national conference. Now,
Right,
next week, I'm going to be in France. I'm giving myself this wonderful self-care vacation on
right
a
on.
river. I know, honey, I'm so proud of myself for doing this. And what I'm going to do is check the program and see if I'm free at 3 o'clock East Coast American. I think in France it's probably 8 p.m. And I think that I can do a program at 8 p.m. So let's plan on
Okay.
next Monday.
Yep, we'll
And
post the link and send the link. I send the link to people that I know are interested or who have liked the post before. I'll do
great.
that. Yeah,
And I'm sending it to a lot of people that I know are interested in a recovery from trauma, whether there's trauma survivors or they work with people that are trauma survivors. And so I send it. And you know what? The other thing we'll start doing is reaching out individually again to people that we know
right.
want to be here. So we need to end. And I just want to say, Denise, I love working with you. I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate your ability to reflect on yourself and tell the truth about some of the tough things and your desire to heal.
And I
Those are,
appreciate you as well.
thank you,
My
sweet.
favorite thing is how smart you are. I really like your smarts.
Thank you so much. And my first response, of course, was conditioned to say, why is she? But no, I hear that. And here's what I've come to. You have your own kind of smarts.
I
I
do.
have my own kind of smarts. And I had no respect for my own kind of smarts because I was measured by the male objective logical standard. It's no accident that 3 of my books have been about emotional intelligence because I'm staking a claim for neurodiverse people, for women, for people that haven't had power that our kind of intelligence, which is the ability to read people as well as we read books, that's super. And thank you, Fred Rogers, for giving some validity to what people have always looked down upon. In fact, it's still called the soft sciences. Yeah,
Yes.
we can talk about that too. So I'm going to say fairly well. And Denise, thank you so much. And
Thank you.
listeners who listen afterwards, you can contact us. Just
Yes,
contact
I'm on
us.
Facebook, Denise Rokicki, like it's spelled right there. Uh, Message me. I'm willing to listen and I'm trauma informed.
I love it. Um, Becoming more and more trauma informed, and just go to Holly Elisa Bruno on Facebook. And you can also go to my book website, and we have our own, what's it called? YouTube. We've got our
Channel.
own YouTube channel. If you go to the YouTube channel, you'll find these on there. By our own, it's got other presentations that I've done over the years, and it's got every one of these programs. So fare thee well. Be kind to yourself. And I will.
Have a great week. And oh, France, how exciting. You love travel.
I love travel because I find my soul there. And because I used to be terrified of traveling, that I was all alone, nobody would be with me. Now I feel like I've got myself. I'm a friendly person. I make
Yeah,
friends wherever I go. And
right.
before I was made fun of for that, my family made fun of that. There's Holly off doing that. Like it was bad. No, honey, it's good.